Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be able to talk to a bunch of people about what my research and what I'm finding out that's going on globally down to locally, because everything that's happening in Australia, if we just talk about, I cover a number of topics, but food is one of about 4. But everything that's happening is it's coming from a global arena. It's coming down through the policies of the United Nations that Australia signs up to, and then it's filtered into our legislation and into our government policies. And so I've been looking at what's being planned and what's being talked about and who are the partnerships behind with the United Nations and what's happening behind it, and how's that going to influence and affect us as consumers of food. So I'm lucky, I live on the Central Coast. We have a little market that's like a 5-minute walk from my house weekly, and I can buy straight from farmers in the Kulnara, area around the Central Coast, and get all my fruit and veg and meat and nearly everything I need. So I'm just talking from the perspective of being a consumer of food. I'm not involved in creation of food, but I want to eat good food. I want to know where my food's coming from and what's happening to it. So I imagine a lot of you will be the same. I just want to thank you, Simon and Lou, for putting this on, as well as Brent for hosting us here. And I'm going to get started. I've got a lot of slides that I'm going to move through. I want to show you what's being planned and what's being talked about. I can't speak about it myself because it actually is so bizarre and dystopian to me that I have to show what they're saying. Plus, it's not my opinion, it's what is in the documents. I do this because I actually think we need to be having the right conversations, and there's not enough eyes on this at all, and they're rapid, very quickly advancing plans to transform the world's food systems. And so this is what I want to show you today and go over. So basically, if I had to sum it up in 3 words, that what they're bringing in is synthetic is sustainable. That's basically their whole argument. The old way of agriculture, so they're not just talking about the chemicals and the pesticides and everything else. They're saying organic food is damaging, and precision fermentation. He's talking about George, the Guardian guy. He's talking about synthetic processes, which I will talk about, and that is going to save the climate. Just quickly, Australia signed the Paris Agreement in 2015, which is a United Nations agreement for net zero and our obligations, and it's the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So most of this fits under, and you'll hear them over and over again, referencing number 2, which is zero hunger. Number 13 is climate action. So we need to turn to synthetic food production for climate change and to feed the world. So the feeding the world is exactly the same. You can see footage back from the 1950s, 1960s. We have to do the green revolution, which was pesticide-laden crops, genetically modified crops, so they're resistant to glyphosate, etc. Monocultures. That was all under the guise of we have to feed the world, and that was the Rockefeller and Gates got involved. So this is a book that a paper that came out mid-2020, Rockefeller Reset the Table. And they're even saying, look, the Green Revolution, they think it was a great idea, but it caused a lot of environmental disturbance. And so they're saying that, but it's only because they're bringing in the next iteration of the Green Revolution and saying we have to solve the problems we created there. Same guys, Bayer Monsanto, same partners, and now we've got to do this instead. And I'll go over what this is. Even though Rockefeller Foundation's saying, there were all these detrimental things with the Green Revolution, they're still in Africa funding the Green Revolution with Bayer Monsanto, the United Nations, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and others. I just want to go over what is in the United Nations documents, or some of them, and I'll just go quickly through them. So this is their food and climate change, healthy diets for a healthier planet, alternative proteins such as plant-based meat and dairy substitutes, insect-based proteins, and so this is lab meat, cell-based cultivated meat, provide promising prospects. This is their transforming food systems, novel plant-based meats, cultivated meat from animal cells, that's lab meat. Alternatives produced through rapid fermentation, that's precision fermentation, which I'll go through. It does say here, the food systems must be transformed, supportive trade policies, and speed up the transformation. And This is another report, their Strategic Framework 2022 to 2031. This is the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. So the FAO is where the food comes from down through the United Nations. There's growing recognition of digitalization and the so-called new technologies. They're talking about CRISPR, which is gene editing. Synthetic, and it's also called synthetic biology, where the genetic material of an organism can be synthesized. And I'll go through that a bit more. So it's all promising, the biotech. This is called biotechnology and gene editing. It's the United Nations, the Food and Agricultural Organization, have a comprehensive mandate from its members to work globally on all aspects of food and agriculture. So Australia is a member of the United Nations and therefore of the Food and Agricultural Organization. They're working globally for us on all aspects of food and agriculture. So Australia's following what they're saying. They say they can request any member to submit information relating to our food policies, our net zero policies, which it all sits under. It also comes under a One Health model, which I will also quickly touch on. So the One Health model is they put everything together. They put the soil health, the ecosystem health, the human health, the animal health, all together into one thing. And so then it all comes under biosecurity risks. Biosecurity interventions. So you could almost say health is almost like risks. You know, what are they going to threaten, how they're going to intervene, and what are they going to do under the One Health model, which Australia is taking up as well. It's all part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So the Fourth Industrial Revolution is where we meld more and more with technology inside our own bodies, inside the plants, inside the animals. They talk about this a lot, the implantation of tech. At the moment, it's like people have the Fitbits, and so that's already taking your pulse and, monitoring your body. It'll be more and more become inside of our own body. And if you're interested in the human aspect of that, you just can search for the Internet of Bio-Nano Things, which is all about implanting tech to pick up on viruses, to send alerts out, etc. When you look at the Food and Agricultural Organisation, and this goes back a long way, they formed a partnership, I think it was 2020, with CropLife to transform the world's food systems. And CropLife is these guys. So there's no conspiracy, there's an open conspiracy that you've got all the big ag and the big chemical companies working hand in hand with the United Nations to transform the world's food systems. They also go and meet yearly at the COP. The COP, United Nations COP. In 2022, the Rockefeller Food and Agricultural Organisation, CGIAR, who I'll talk about soon, all hosted about how we're going to transform the global food systems. At COP27, the investors give warm welcome as Food and Agricultural Organisation commit to net zero roadmap for food. An $18 trillion coalition of investors are calling for this net zero transformation of our food systems. And Australia endorses the Emirates Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action that came out of the COP28. So Australia endorses all of this. There's just been a complete takeover of our food systems, but it's been in progress for a very long time. The United Nations put on a food summit, I think it was around 2022. Lots of smaller farmers pulled out of it and sent a letter saying it's been completely corporate captured. You've got the World Economic Forum in there, you've got Nestle, Tyson, Bayer, and they're the ones really running the show. It's become completely corporatised, but it has been for a very long time. And they talk about this multi-stakeholderism, so all these organisations, and it's meant to be us as all farmers are working together to create this transformation of the world's food systems, but it's very much just a corporate entities are transforming, working hand in hand with our government. Yeah, basically there's a corporate takeover of the United Nations Food Systems Summit. So there's lots of things saying it, and these are the sort of the big guys involved in the Food Systems Summit. You've got the Rockefellers, the World Economic Forum, Bayer, which is Bayer Monsanto. Nestle, terrible human rights, environmental rights, track records, yet these are the guys in charge of our global food systems. And in Australia, we've got Corteva. So Corteva is one of the massive chemical companies. Corteva AgriScience becomes founding partner of new Zero Net Emissions Research Centre, getting money from the federal government of Australia. And you can see here Corteva and another company join forces to accelerate gene editing, advance climate resilience in agriculture. It's all about gene editing. We've got Bayer Crop Science unlocks the next level of value for soybean growers. I'm just showing you how much our government's captured. So it's just talking about soybeans. They're already tolerant, to glyphosate, so you can spray. I'm sure everyone's aware you can spray poisons over everything and they'll still keep growing even though everything else dies around them. But they're going to make them resistant to lots more other chemicals as well. There's iterations of it going into 2030. So they're doing that, Bayer's doing that, and then the Grains Research and Development Corporation of Australia is also doing stuff around soybeans. And then you look at the Grains Research have a partnership with Bayer, Herbicide Innovation Partnership. So they're working together hand in hand. And it says here, Australia is growing into the single biggest cereal market for Bayer. So that's Bayer Monsanto, and one of our most important single country markets in the world. And the Herbicide Innovation Partnership has seen Australia promoted to a priority one country in Bayer's global herbicide development program. Sustainable agriculture. So what are they? You'll hear about this sustainable agriculture for the climate over and over again. So what is it? Well, it's biotech, it's biotechnology. That is what is now being touted as sustainable agriculture. And they talk about it, they can be used to create crops that are resistant to pests and diseases. They want to put synthetic stuff within the soil as well for soil health. And it's going to create productive and nutritious crops, supposedly. And so biotech is a technological application in biology, transferring genetic material containing a specific trait from one crop organism into another in order to improve crop productivity and resistance to various stresses. This is the role of biotech in the Australian beef and dairy industries. So again, this is about key biotechnology applications for the beef and dairy sectors in Australia. It's going to increasingly become more important in both industries as the demand for sustainable beef and dairy products increase. It says here, the future of biotechnology rests on acceptance by the general public. If the end purchasers do not understand how or where their food is produced, they will avoid it and buy from a different source. Misunderstanding and fear of the science behind the technology are widespread. And the way to get through this is by educating opinion leaders, media, scientists, health professionals, industry advocates, consumer groups. So it's basically putting propaganda through. And the CRISPR-edited seeds are planting a sustainable future for the agricultural industry. It's no surprise to find synthetic biology leading the revolution to feed the world. And they're selling this CRISPR. So CRISPR is where you make cuts and you cut out parts of I'm not a geneticist, but you cut out parts of the gene and you can just so the part that will make a potato go brown, you can just cut it out. And you can make all these different changes in the genetic structure. You can insert things or you can let it grow back just with something cut out of it. And that's what CRISPR does. So that was only discovered or came into being around 10 to 12 years ago. And the way they sell this is my understanding, the way they sell it is they say, well, organisms evolve and change over time. So we're just doing it and we're just speeding it up. So it's the same, and then they'll say, so we're working with nature now, we're not working against nature, and they keep selling it as working with nature. But it's not the same because nature does it in a particular way for a particular reason, and it's slow. This is like they're going to go mass pushing out genetically edited synthetic products. So they're talking about things like you can implant tech inside a cow. Everything's hooked up to the internet. You can see the insides of that cow and how it's all working through your computer. And when the cow eats, you can see the microbiome and you can personalise antibiotics to it. They can they want to personalise milk, make a gut model of the cow and use personalised information about a human through our heart rate, blood pressure, etc., and compose the milk for the human requirements. Doesn't mean they can do any of this or any of this is going to work, but it's like a nightmare experiment. With the CRISPR, in 2019, I wasn't even aware of it. This was not on my radar at all. In 2019, they've allowed the first part of CRISPR, the gene editing, to be allowed through into our food supply without any labelling. And that's, you cut the gene and let it grow back naturally. So you don't sort of put anything in it or you don't make any more changes. That's already in our food supply. And one of the concerns with CRISPR is that there are unpredictable effects. And that's supposedly where regulation can protect both researchers and communities. So it's like this sort of really you can just make some change over here and it doesn't make any other ripple effect out, which has never been the case, and there's always unintended consequences. This is Mackay Future Foods Biohub. This is the Queensland government, and they've set up a Future Foods Biohub to make synthetic food. Synthetic biology, recombinant proteins, which is genetic material from multiple sources, and they create sequences that would not otherwise be found in the genome. And any DNA sequence can be created and introduced into living organisms. So this is really heating up in Australia. Meet the startup that makes milk without cows. So this is a precision fermentation. So what you do is, and they call it these names like fermentation because people are, quite comfortable with the idea of fermentation. But this is made in big vats. Food scientists program the genetic code into a yeast, and that yeast starts pumping out the desired protein. And it's GMO free. It's not called GMO. So in January, the Queensland government announced funding for Cauldron. This is the company to start doing the biolab in Mackay, but it's also in Orange as well. Then we've got the first lab meat about to be allowed into the market in Australia. It's a lab quail. And here you've got Matt Keane. So it wasn't even allowed into the market yet. We've got out, who was he? He was the New South Wales Treasurer, opening up the building for them, even though it wasn't even legal to have it. But, they've got a lot of confidence it's all going to be able to, go through the food standards body. Fazan's put it out about 3 or 4 months ago to bring this in as a novel food. They've got to have it as a novel food because it's never been used before as food or eaten as food, this lab quail. They take a cell from, this is my understanding, they take a cell from the embryo of a quail. They put it in some substance that's barley infused with pig genes. That multiplies. They scaffold it somehow and just grow it and keep it bubbling along until it's sort of this muck at the end that you can put through a 3D printer and make it look like a steak. That's pretty much it. That's just about to be allowed into the food market in Australia. So I did quite a bit, and I did a big submission. Even though this is all about this, this transformative way of the food systems, and we've got to do it, they're all the appendixes that weren't allowed to see. So when the food company, which was Val, the food company that put in to do this lab quail, they have to put something into Fazan's, the food body, their application, and we can see parts of it because they asked for public submissions. All of these reports are not available to be seen by the public because it's commercial, confidential information. So you cannot even see the processes. You can see little bits and pieces, but you can't see any of the ins and outs. So they're asking us to put in public submissions when we can't see the data as to how things are being made. And that's exactly what's going to happen if this floods the market. Okay, so we've got CGIAR, that's a global body. What they're doing is they're creating these CRISPRed seeds, and they're creating them, and then they're saying these are better for the climate. And so I just want to show this because this is going to come under climate change, what they're going to do. So they've changed the seeds. There's big seed vaults around the world, and there's one in Norway. CGIAR has been instrumental in collecting seeds, and you've got Crop Trust as well, who look after this big one in Norway. It's an international organisation safeguarding the world's crop diversity. That was established by the Food and Agricultural Organisation and CGIAR. With the Crop Trust donors, Australia, that's the money from Australia. You've got Bill and Melinda Gates, you've got CropLife, which is Bayer Monsanto and Syngenta, so they're all putting all their money into this. There's other countries, I just didn't put them all through. Now, what's happened is through the Green Revolution, and so if you just talk about Africa, because it happened in India and Mexico and different countries, but they went in, they stripped farmers from their seed supplies, and they took them away from them and put them in these seed trusts. They're now pushing them back on them. Genetically modified. Well, that's been happening for a while, but now it's this next iteration of CRISPRed seeds that these people and these farmers need to use because it's better for the climate. And it's going to happen in Australia too if they can keep this, I think, because of the narrative they're creating. I think it's going to be 100%. So this is a article, One Empire Over Seed, Control Over the World's Seed Banks. A great seed and biodiversity piracy is underway not just by corporations, but also by super rich billionaires whose wealth and power open doors to their every whim. When the Green Revolution was brought into India and Mexico, farmers' seeds were rounded up from the fields and locked in international institutions to be used to breed Green Revolution varieties engineered to respond to chemical inputs. And so that's what's happened there. This is CGIAR and how they talk about seeds. This is the way they speak. Smallholder farmers, especially women and disadvantaged groups, are particularly vulnerable to climate-related and other challenges, compromising their ability to meet their own food, nutrition and income needs, much less contribute to local and national food security. And then they talk about climate change and how these poor farmers are having to use old varieties of seeds or recycle seeds, which is probably, you know, keep them and share them. Keep them and share them. These poor farmers. Yeah, until gender disparity, and then it talks about gender. Then when you see what they're talking about, seed sector actors, so the big chemical companies, increase their investments in making more CRISPRed and, you know, synthetically altered seeds. Farmers adopt climate resilient, nutritious, market demanded varieties more, so farmers have to take up these seeds. And then the government partners and brings in the policies that make that happen. Got the biotech giants use patents and GMOs to control the future of food. I'm just showing you, you know, like there are quite a few groups that have been documenting this for quite a long time. And so they've gone into Africa. This is about how the cowpea, which is a staple of West African diets, they're trying to put through some legislation in Ghana that if you share this seed, this genetically edited seed in some way, that you get minimum 10 years prison sentence, maximum 15 years prison sentence. And here we go, we've got CSIRO, who's instrumental in everything. They're partnering with funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to create this cowpea to allow this to happen. This has been going on forever with the Food and Agricultural Organisation. There's a very interesting woman, Erna Bennett, and so this was back in the 70s. She was one of the people, they wanted to conserve these genetic stock in the seeds. They were really worried about it, you know, becoming extinct or through, you know, urbanisation or whatever, that you'd lose varieties. So there were a lot of really well-meaning scientists and people wanting to collect these seeds. So she was part of that. She was instrumental at that. And while at the Food and Agricultural Organisation, she became increasingly concerned that the immense efforts to collect and conserve the world's precious and irreplaceable germplasm was in great danger of being hijacked by powerful private interests. And she had to leave the Food and Agricultural Organisation in 1982 because of it. So it's been going on forever. But one of the other things they're really going to do is bring in nanotech to put in the soil and the plants for nanosensors. And I'm very new to this. I've only started looking at this in the last week. There's been a great deal of time and money investigating new applications for nanotechnology, but relatively little has been spent on the effects of it and the dangers of it. Nanotechnology is an area of science and engineering that involves the study and manipulation of particles 1 to 100 nanometres in size. A nanometre is 1/1000th of a metre. So it's breaking things down into tiny, tiny, tiny little particles. Now the problem with that is, so even if something is okay in a larger size, once you break it down there, it can go through, you know, into your brain, into your lungs. It can get into parts of your body that it couldn't, you know, it can't normally. And they get more, scientists know that substances become more reactive as their particles get smaller because the surface area is greater. So there's a lot to understand in there, which I'm still getting my head around, but they're talking about using this for sustainable soil, nanomaterials. It's all about sustainability. So it's about nanotech, and it's something to get hold of. This is the different things that you can use, different sorts of nanoparticles, and it cut off a little bit, but on the right-hand side you can see that's the issues to human health. So negative oxidation, DNA damage, physiological functions, inflammation, decrease in oxidative stress for a lot of them. So there's a lot of health issues, and they're not actually sure. They haven't been putting that much time into looking at the concerns around it. Nanofertilizers, improving crop nutrition and food security. The danger of these materials on human beings and the environment are still unidentified. We've got toxicity and environmental risks of nanomaterials. Due to the very small size of engineered nanomaterials, inhalation exposure can potentially occur to airborne particles. So just that it can get into your lungs, it can cause all these issues. Researchers examine nanotechnological methods for improving agriculture, that's crop life. So this is something that we need to put our attention onto, and I've got to move through quite a lot of this very quickly. Nano-enabled precision delivery in plants. We've got the Nano Institute in Sydney, at Sydney University, and that's part of the Network for Sustainable Nanotechnology, and it's all about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The watchdogs monitoring the brave new world of nanotech. We've got APVMA, monitors for animals, TGA for human health. You know, doesn't fill me with any confidence, and Food Standards Body for food. This is the Food and Agricultural Organisation. We've got the Pacific Soil Partnership. The chair of that is Mr. Peter Wilson from Australia, and he is from CSIRO. So what they're going to do is they're going to start monitoring everyone's soil for their carbon drawdown. So if you see all these carbon credits and how much carbon you can put in the soil, what they're going to do is that through satellite imagery, they're going to have complete sense of what's going on in your farm, and you're going to be made to draw down more carbon into your soil, which is an issue when you look at that synthetic is sustainable and where this is going to lead to. Disease, pests and viruses. We have an MOU between the World Health Organisation, the Food and Agricultural Organisation, the World Organisation for Animal Health, and another United Nations department, UNEP, and they're going to make sure that sustainably balance and optimise the health of humans, animals, plants and the environment. And then we've got Australia, showcasing the wonders of One Health. So we've got CSIRO in there, and we have, so everything comes under their purview under this. Director of the CDC's One Health Unit, Dr. Sarah Button, CSIRO Health and Biosecurity, Dr. Kim Blasdell. In Canada, they're pushing through something which people are trying to push back against, where they can regulate commercial activities that can contribute to pandemic risk, including industrial animal agriculture. Now, I'm not keen on industrial animal agriculture, but it depends, I guess, what they mean by industrial. So, but now they can intervene through this act, and they can promote things such as the production of alternative proteins, which is like the synthetic, when they call about plant-based proteins, they're not talking about good veggie burgers or lentil burgers. They're talking about highly synthetic plant proteins and insects, eating insects. So when the varroa mite happened in this area, and they killed huge amounts of bees, and it ended up flowing over and having issues for crops, etc. They abandoned that after like 15 months. There was one article in the ABC saying it was actually here for 1 to 1.5 years prior before it being picked up in Newcastle. It's still, if you look on their website, they still say it was picked up in mid-2022, I think, at Newcastle. So it's really dodgy. It's like, well, when did you know that it was here in 2021? Because at that point you would have known it's already too late and we can't keep killing the bees. And why have you still got on your website now that it was only found in 2022? So I really fought this bee stuff, really fought it, and I really looked at the APVMA, who were the ones who were saying that the pest, because they put fipronil all through the bush. And fipronil is banned in many countries around the world because it's so toxic. And fipronil was being reviewed by the APVMA for 20-something years for its toxicity. It was still in review. They started to review it about its environmental impacts in 2002. They still hadn't finished it, and then this study to make sure it was okay to be used in the environment 20-something years later, and then they're allowing it to be used off-label, so not for the reasons it's meant to be used for. So they put all poison through the environment and killed huge amounts of bees, and then went, oopsie, we know it was here way before. Nothing adds up. It's a very bizarre, non-trust, dodgy story. So now the answer to this is let's put tech on the top of hives so it can monitor and do, send out alerts if any varroa is being discovered. So it's this whole putting detection technology in everything, implanting it in everything. So that's their solution. That's what will happen. And it doesn't matter that, you know, EMFs disrupt pollinators and have negative effects. At the moment in Queensland, they're spraying chemicals and fipronil down through airplanes into state forests and national parks to kill fire ants. They're baiting people's, I think it's 6 times over 3 years, they're going in and baiting everything, you know, like people's backyards, schools, childcare centres, parks, and it's fipronil, which is banned in other countries, and another one, so, you know, highly toxic chemicals. So I was involved in this Guardian article because I went and talked at the inquiry about the fire ants because I was so concerned about the fipronil. A 2019 study found that fipronil transferred into fetuses and caused infantile adverse health outcomes and can negatively affect male fertility, leading to infertility. So they're just firebombing chemicals. Chickens kept in gardens will have to be registered under Plan New Rules. That's in England, I think. Yeah, change. And then same thing in Australia. If you sell any eggs, you've got to register your birds. More than 1 million chickens have been killed. This is a while ago. It's probably much more now. Have been killed in southwestern Victoria because of the chicken flu or the bird flu. Aussie tomato farms shut down over very significant virus threat. So we're going to see a lot of this. We're going to see a lot of natural food sources being shut down. And the APVMA, who's the ones who give the green light, you know, to what's happening to the chemicals, etc. A massively damning report came out saying that they were completely corporate captured. So they're the same as the TGA, where the pesticide companies pay them to look at their products and give them the tick of approval. So the vast majority of their who would be paying them would be CropLife. They're co-opting buy local, and I have to sort of do more work on this, but this is just a little bit I had a look. Urban agriculture, so it's all going to be about urban agriculture because, you know, you live in your smart city and you have your urban agriculture, you know, your community garden, and that gets a $9 million boost from the USDA. So that's $9 million. So where did that $9 million go? I went to this farmer here. This woman, this, you know, ex-investment banker. So there's a lot of ex-investment bankers who've suddenly become farmers. So what she's done is she's got this company called TIME to improve Mississippi economics. I think they must be like giving out grants. So let's see what they're doing, the TIME. This is urban gardening. They're partnering with Kellogg's. You know, these great people who have, you know, have this wonderful track record of healthy food, and the other one, Alcorn SDR Alcorn SDR, and they sit within a biotechnology building. So this is what's going to happen. We're going to have, and this will be in Australia as well, we're going to have more and more funding of urban and community gardens. It's going to be synthetic seeds, it's going to be synthetic fertilisers, it's going to make everyone feel like it's nice and lovely, but it's co-opted. Tracking and tracing. Australia with the net zeros have to get their emissions down on the farms. Mandatory adoption, considering mandatory adoption of reporting standards for businesses, that's happened around their companies they support and their emissions. This is GrainCorp, unveiled its latest sustainable agriculture initiative, GrainCorp Next. We're working closely with growers to identify emission reduction opportunities at the farm gate and beyond. So yeah, get the emissions down from anyone. So we're talking probably about the bigger end of town here. But it's interesting to see the way, because this is going to come for small farmers as well. This is Corteva. This is one of their climate positive leader program people. And his name is David Stratham, and he's in New South Wales. He's got a regenerative. The word regenerative does not mean that there's no chemicals anymore. These guys have taken over the term regenerative. So he's got a regenerative cotton farm. So it would, if Corteva is promoting him, it would be heavily, you know, involved in agrochemical industry. They've got Good Earth Cotton. If you can see at the top, they've got Fibre Trace, and they've got Miriam Vale. So they're 3 companies. So Good Earth Cotton is their cotton, and Fibre Trace I'm going to talk to you about. So this is what they're going to start doing. Fibre Trace, every fibre tells a story. Photon marker system for fibre material. Rare earth, ceramic pigment, luminescent nanoparticle photon makers are mixed in specific proportions within cellulose slurry and extruded to form trace fibre strands. Then when I go into, or well, I wouldn't do it, but when a person goes into the store, they can take their mobile phone out, and the mobile phone, they can put it against the clothes, and it will come up about how sustainable, where was this grown. So and they want to do that with everything in our food, in our packaging, in every single thing will be tracked and traced. And the other company they've got is Vale, where they're doing all the carbon credits on plantations. This is the company that's overlooking that greenfield resources soil rejuvenation. And when you look up them, they talk about synthetic biology tools for microbes. So you start to synthetically edit and alter the microbes in the soil, put extra microbes in the soil that are meant to be so much better for the planet. As an update on integrating blockchain from farm to fork, so we're going to see more of this. You know, a lot of really good ideas are co-opted. So the farm to the fork, we want to know where our food's coming from. We want to know that it's, you know, what we thought, you know, sustainable, I guess. From the way the food's made, the farm, the soil, everything on the farm, that's all going to be tracked and traced through this system. And supposedly we, the consumers, want it because we want to know where our food's coming from. You know, even though we do want to know where our food's coming from, that doesn't mean I don't want that system because it's catching people. Groundbreaking platform builds digital twins, so that's where everything that's happening on the farm can be seen on a computer. It's all captured through all the sensors. CSIRO, Microsoft collaborate, real-time data and puts it into the hands of farmers in a way that's easy to use and simple to interpret. So that's farming. That is what farming's looking like. You know, as we go along, the data will alert you to your cows needing something, or, you know, you'll be sitting with your smartphone. But it's not just them. You know, it's the way of capturing all the data that's happening on the farm. The Land, Meat and Livestock Australia launched a new environmental credentials platform to measure sustainable production practices on farms. NAB is involved, collecting data and making sure we can verify claims. We've had a lot of conversations with end users, banks, retailers and government agencies who want to measure their emissions, which is it's mandatory now in Australia. So that's what the sort of computer model, it's called a living lab. So you can see everything that's going on in the farm. Biotech to reduce methane emissions from cattle. Carbon Link, Grain Central, and you know, you can store more carbon in your soil. So yeah, again, just having to account, but you have to account for that, how you're doing it. So your farm's no longer really your farm. Invest in your farmer. As their virtual farm grows, members can track holdings while farmers provide transparency around their farming practices. So we can all be a farmer now through our app on our phone. Okay, Regen has been co-opted at the Food and Agricultural Pavilion COP27, CGIAR, CropLife and another group all got together to talk about multi-stakeholder partnerships to tackle the global food crisis through regenerative agriculture. So they're talking about aspects of regen, I'm putting together a video where I've got them speaking and then me unpacking it and looking at what they're really talking about, because on the surface they talk as though it's all just about crop cover and moving cattle around and all the good regen principles. They're not talking about anything that's very real. Scaling regenerative agriculture by Bayer. This is how they're selling it, Regen. Byron Bay VC Regen Ventures raises $67 million that help heal the planet. I think they're going to put $1 billion into the regenerative technology space, which is all about artificial intelligence with satellite imagery to measure soil organic carbon. And this Dan Fitzgerald, who's the guy in the middle, who's a techie, I think, or an investment banker. I think he was an investment banker. He believes that lab meat can redefine meat and is one of the most regenerative practices that can be possible. Yeah, so it's all about plant-based proteins and lab meat. I'm going to have to not go through this, but there's a huge amount they're going to incentivise. They talk about incentivising farmers to become regenerative, and there's a whole bunch of ways they're going to do that. One of these is, I think this is a product, so you buy the chemical company's synthetic product, you put it on your soil and whatever else, and then you can get more carbon credits. They've linked up to some global carbon credit. You can get more money back for your carbon credits. We've got Rockefeller financing for regenerative agriculture, talking about get less interest rate if you go this way. You'll get, your insurance will be less, so it's incentivising, at the same time it's punishing anyone who doesn't until it gets really restrictive and you push people out of the market. And then they've got all the ESG, I don't know if you're aware, environment. So companies are going to have to say and know exactly where everything they got, their products they help. So even here, a small health food shop they'd have to account for the amount of carbon that's been involved. So it depends on, if you're looking at them talking about synthetic is better for the environment, that's where they're going to get people through the supply chain. So you can see Corteva's all through it, carbon initiatives, carbon and ecosystem services. Microsoft just bought Indigo Ag, which is a Corteva, use Corteva's products, Microsoft will buy and pay them, so you're getting squeezed out by these big guys. Okay, I just want to say, I'm going to finish in a sec. The whole world, it's all a synthetic biology experiment. When you start to look, you realise they've got complete plans to synthetically edit and alter the whole ecosystem and human beings, but I won't get into human beings. This is MIT University. They want to sculpt evolution, which means they want to synthetically edit evolution. Evolution gives rise to every living thing and all of human culture, but evolved systems are very different from those designed by humans. So just natural is harder to predict and to design, and it exhibits a frustrating tendency to evolve away from engineered behaviours. This is the way these people think. So they want to genetically edit trees. So when we're talking about all these plantations and needing to rewild, there are massive serious plans to have genetically edited trees that draw down more carbon and create more wood mass, supposedly. Australia's under the Forest Stewardship Council. That's one of our sustainable forest systems. The Forest Stewardship Council is starting to work in this genetically edited tree arena. And one of them is using RNA, CSIRO, the silencing achiever. They just can silence genes. They want to synthetically alter root systems to draw down more carbon of plants. Bill Gates is the biggest owner of farmland in the US. He wants to develop genetically modified crops to develop biofuels, that's big plans in Australia as well. How do ecosystems collapse? Our results indicate that directed evolution with humans helping species. So when species are going to become extinct, you can supposedly genetically edit them. Aussie plan to genetically engineer new super species of wild animals. This is Bill Gates. He wants to genetically edit mothers' and babies' microbiome and synthetically edit it. So there's just lots and lots around that. I just had a whole bunch of Australian government documents talking. I won't go through it, but you can see there's synthetic biology roadmap by the CSIRO. There's climate smart agriculture. There's a biotech agriculture. Edible insects roadmap, the soil strategy, it's all got this biotech running through it, and the agriculture. So I've got all of that. The two I just want to talk about, and then I'll finish. A few months ago, FSANZ, which is the food body of Australia and New Zealand, proposed that changing the definition of GMO to allow a whole bunch of GMOs to go into the market without any labelling or safety testing. One of the examples I just said about how you can have genetically edited root systems that supposedly draw down more carbon, that won't be called GMO. As long as if you have an apple tree and as long as the fruit isn't from a genetically edited part, it's just the root system that's genetically edited, that's not GMO anymore. It's just only one of many examples. So there's a lot that's now not going to be called a genetically modified food. I've written a whole couple of articles on that on my Substack. They had the public submissions and they closed. But they need to do this to be able to flood the market with all this synthetic biology. They can't be going, at the moment, every time you want to put a GMO through or a synthetic thing through, you have to put it through the FSANZ. It has to go out for public consultations, 2 rounds. It'll take a year or 2 for every new food product. This way they can just smash them out and we won't even know. It'll be in organic food and we won't know. If you change the definition of GM and organics is only non-GMO, well, does that make sense? There's whole stuff in there that's not being picked up. Now, the other thing they're doing now is their proposed amendments, and I only found it last week, proposed amendments to the Gene Technology Act 2000. So that closes on the 8th of November, which is Thursday, and I haven't had a good chance to look at it yet. But it will be horrendous. I really encourage people to go and have a look at what they're proposing. I listened to their webinar, so what they said in the webinar, but there'll be a lot more in the in the documents. Amendments are proposed to ensure the legislation can keep up with further advancements in health, medicine, agriculture and animals and make it easier for industry. So they don't want to get in the way of innovation. That's how they speak about it. This includes pest control, medical research and commercial therapies, biomanufacturing and species conservation, health. They want to encourage companies to undertake clinical trials in Australia to develop novel treatments. They want biotechnologies, including synthetic biology, to be able to move through quicker. And they said in that synthetic biology has been listed as a critical technology in the government, from the government side. They want all this to go through so they can protect threatened species, manage feral animals, genetically edit feral animals. They talk about, you can genetically edit an animal, so then it goes out and it mates and then their offspring inherit the genetically edited gene, so they go sterile. So you can just wipe out a whole, that's what they think, you can just wipe out a whole, foxes and vaccines. They want vaccines which protect Australian fauna, and genetically engineered crops which have increased yields with less energy input makes agriculture more sustainable. So by lowering carbon emissions. Now, gene ethics, we've got one group in Australia, as far as I'm aware, who's been working on this since the 80s, and it's gene ethics. I'm astounded how little coverage this has, or how many little eyes this has in Australia. There's a bit more happening in New Zealand. There's about 3 or 4 groups that do stuff in New Zealand, but in Australia, as far as I can see, there's one group. Okay, so this is I'm starting to do little cartoons just so I can get the last word with the government, and it is a bit more glamorous than I am, but that's my Substack. So, I've just put it as an example, lab created quail entering the Australian, please look it up. I will put this talk up, I will put the links, I will put the video up. Basically, if I say what I think they're going to capture everyone in this sustainable synthetic markets, and they're making the rationale that it's better for the climate, and with the net zero obligations and everything else, and the ESG scoring and your emission scoring, I feel like if we don't get active right now and start challenging this with the, whoever, as many farmers who care about this, start challenging it under the peak bodies, this is going to happen over time, incrementally. How a really good farming practice, biodynamic farms and organic farms and permaculture farms, they need to get a bit organised around this, because otherwise I think they're going to get knocked out with this argument that's being created. That's how I see it. And I really feel like, it's one of the most important things. I don't want my children or my grandchildren having to eat this stuff. And the disease, the concerns and around their health and the nutritional level and everything else. I just finished on with the lab meat when I was looking at it. No, with the changes to the gene tech, the changes where they want to make it so the GMO food is in our food and GMO's in our food, they are making the argument that it doesn't matter how you produce food, it's the end result, the end product, that's all you look at. And what they mean by that is you can take some meat, you can take some quail, you can take some lab quail. The quail has a certain amount of minerals, certain amount of vitamins, blah, blah, in it. They can then put in the lab quail, they'll synthetically put in that amount of minerals, that amount of vitamins. They then go, that real meat's got this much, the lab one's got this much, they're the same. That's their argument. It doesn't matter how it's made. If the end thing is measurable in the way they measure it, it's the same thing. So I don't agree with that at all. But anyway, I could keep talking. It's massive, but thank you for listening. There's lots of really good regenerative farmers. I buy from a regenerative farmer, but there's a co-option going on. And until the regen people I'm a little surprised that the big players in the regen movement aren't speaking about this, because they're talking as though it's all good for regen. I don't understand why organics has the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Why would the big organic foundations of Australia be sitting under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals when the UN's saying it's synthetic? Why aren't the permaculture, why aren't the big bodies coming out and saying, they've co-opted us? They've co-opted what we're talking about. Maybe they don't know.
I was just going to say, I don't think they do know. I'm pretty involved with a lot of the regen big hitters, as you say, and I don't think they know, but there is a lot of corporate coming into the regen space.
Yeah.
That's a good way.
It seems to me that they're taking away from the natural intelligence of farmers, particularly multi-generational farmers. And so anyone can step in with their smartphones and investment background and whatever and become a farmer. And, you know, wearing old farming clothes doesn't make you a farmer.
It's all lies and deceptions.
Yes.
You've got to learn to tip everything upside down. When somebody tells you something, you've got to question everything. If the government tells you something, the cup is this way, learn to tip it upside down. Until we can train people to do that and question everything, because we're being lied to by deception completely. They use words and they do the opposite continuously.